Hello, um, good morning to friends in the West. Good afternoon, good evening to my friends in the other parts of the world, wherever you are. Now, today I want to discuss together with you in very shortly some of the things that we find in Surah Al-Azab, chapter 33 of the Quran. Now, there's a notion among Muslims that the Quran is a tanzil. It's a tanzil from Allah. It's a revelation that came down, was revealed down from Allah, from the seventh heaven, um, through basically through Jibril or the angel Gabriel, over a period of 23 years to the Prophet Muhammad, from 610 to 632 AD. Now, there's also a notion that the Quran is uncreated. You know, it's being preserved in the heavenly tablets, in the heavens, way before the world was, way before anything else was. The Quran was there, uncreated. It is the uncreated word of God. Now, today I don't want to bog you down into the discussions of whether the Quran is really created or uncreated, whether it is eternal or not eternal. That is a subject that I leave to the Muslims. But then there is a notion that what we find in the Quran is actually revealed from Allah. Now, sometimes you read a verse of the Quran and you do not understand what it says. Now, let me read, and I'll be together with you just looking at a few portions of Surah Azab, Surah chapter 33. And the reason I already did this in Swahili, the reason I'm doing it in English is that some of you have requested me, that they do not understand, my friends from Nigeria and many more who do not understand what I was talking about in the video that I just concluded. And so I thought, let me do this in English shortly so that we can get to understand each other. Now, chapter 33, I'm reading from the Yusuf Ali translation. Verse 40 says, Muhammad is not the father of any of your men, but he is the messenger of Allah and the seal of the prophets. And Allah has full knowledge of all things. So this verse is saying that Muhammad is not the father of any of your men. Min rajulun, any of your men. Why is this verse, why is this ayat very specific, talking about Muhammad not being a father to any of your men? Now, to understand the Quran, you got to go behind the scenes to understand something that the Muslims call sababul nuzul, the reason for the revelation, the reason why this verse is saying so. And this cannot be found in the Quran. We can actually find it when we go back to the books of Hadith and the Surah and discover, what was happening in the life of the Prophet Muhammad at this juncture. What was it? Now, at this point, Muhammad had an adopted son. This adopted son, his name was Zaid. Zaid, his biological father was called Harith. But at one point, this young man was caught in the war and he was enslaved. And so he was a slave. And so Muhammad redeemed him. And when Muhammad redeemed him, he became like a son to him. And so the Arabs, they used to call Zaid bin Muhammad, because it is Muhammad that had adopted him. And to the Arabs, when they adopted a child, that child became part of the family. And therefore, even had all the rights as the other children. And therefore, to the Arabs, Zaid at this point was just like Qasim. He was just like Ibrahim, the children of Prophet Muhammad, the sons of Prophet Muhammad. And therefore, they called him Zaid bin Muhammad. But something happened along the way. Now, this guy was a slave. So remember, at this point, the Muslims were a persecuted minority. As they left Makkah, they were a persecuted minority. And therefore, Muhammad, to show that Islam unifies the slave and the noble, he did something. He had his first cousin. Her name was Zainab bint Jash. They were first cousins. And so he willingly had this young man marry his cousin, Zainab. Now, they had a good marriage. Like any other marriage, it had the ups and downs. But it is said that at one point, now this is a story that has been narrated by At-Tabari and has been narrated by many other Muslims, and it's also been narrated in the Surah books. In particular, if you find the book Surah al-Nabi, Surah al-Rasul by Ibn Hisham, that has since been also received by Ibn Hisham, you will find this story and many other early Muslim authors that wrote this story. It is said that Muhammad in a nutshell one day went to visit his adopted son and did not find him. And I see my brother Muhammad. Welcome. I want to bring him on and we can discuss this. We're talking about Surah 33 and in particular verse 40, but we will be, talking about many other verses, and you're free to make a contribution. And I'm just giving a background on Zainab, how he bint Jash, and how he eventually married Zaid bin Harith. And so these guys were married. When Muhammad went to visit him, it is said that he did not find his son at home, but he found his daughter-in-law, cousin. Now, these were days before the hijab. These were days before, the veiling of the Muslim woman, before Allah brought down the verses that required the woman to veil herself. And she was at home. And it's said that the way she was dressed, at that point, in a revealing dress or something, it is apparent that the Prophet of God liked her. And therefore, At-Tabari and the other Muslim writers praise this woman. She from that point discerned that the man of God wanted her, and therefore she narrated the story to her husband, and eventually it led to her divorce, or rather Zaid divorcing her. Now, having known that story, let's read verse 37 of this chapter. It says, "Behold, thou didst say to the one who had received the grace of Allah, and thy favor, retain you in wedlock your wife, and fear Allah. But you did hide in your heart that which Allah was about to make manifest, and you feared people, but it is more fitting that you should fear Allah." And then when Zaid had dissolved his marriage with her, with the necessary formality, we joined her in marriage to you, in order that in future there may be no difficulty for the believers in the matter of marriage with the wives of their adopted sons, when the latter have dissolved with the necessary formality. Their marriage with them and Allah's command must be fulfilled. So this now Muhammad comes eventually and marries Zainab. Remember, Zainab is his first cousin. But that was a normal thing among the Arabs. The first cousins would marry. It was a normal thing in the Middle East back then. But on this verse now, it is apparent that at this time when Muhammad was telling this young man, remain with your wife, in his heart he was already desiring this woman. In other words, Allah had already planted in his heart desires for another man's wife. Now, the God I serve, according to the Bible, he hates divorce. But apparently Allah here is very clear that he instructed the Prophet, while this woman was still the wife of Zaid, he had instructed him to marry her. And so Muhammad hid those things, hid those desires in his heart. And he feared men. He feared, and that's why it's called Surah Al-Ahzab. Ahzab means groupings. Because these people now are meeting and they say, hey, have you heard what the prophet, have you heard what the man of God did? Have you heard? And so Muhammad here is saying that he hid in his heart. Allah is saying that Muhammad hid in his heart what Allah had wanted to reveal, so that it may not be hard for the Muslims if they want to marry the former wives of their adopted children. In other words, if the marriage has been nullified, you can marry your former daughter-in-law, and you can make her your wife. Now, for me, it beats logic. It doesn't. Something sounds very disturbing here. When we are told that this is a revelation from Allah, so Allah is actually granting a permission that you marry somebody else's wife. And it says that when Zaid had finished whatever he wanted with her, then we made her lawful to you to marry her. Now, remember, as I said, that the Arabs and the Qurayshis in particular, when you adopted a son, they used to see him as a real son. And so they used to call him Zaid bin Muhammad. And so when they began to talk, you know what? Allah again reveals a verse to protect his prophet. What does he say? He says in verse 40 now, the one that we just read, Muhammad is not a father to any of your men. So when he's talking about to any of your men, min rajulun, any of your men specifically, he is referring to Zaid. So do not say that Zaid is my son. No, he's not my son. Do not call him my son. You know, and then let's again read verse 5 and 6, and let's see what Allah is revealing. It's very funny. Now, verse 4, it says, Allah has not made for any man two hearts in his one body, nor has he made your wives whom you divorce by zihar. And I'll talk about that marriage later on. Your mothers, nor has he made your adopted sons your sons. Such is only a manner of speech by your mouths. But Allah tells you the truth, and he shows the right way. So in this verse here, Allah is saying that he has not made your adopted children, your adopted sons, your real sons. He has not made them as if they're your real children. So Allah is actually rejecting the whole issue of adoption here, as perceived by the Arabs of the days before Islam. And so it says, no. I have not given you two hearts. In other words, you cannot love Qasim. You cannot love Ibrahim, your biological sons, the same way as you love Zaid. So you cannot say that he is my son. Now Allah, in my humble view, is being used here. Muhammad is using Allah here as a cover-up for his weaknesses as a man. You see, I will come and discuss on a different day the Muhammad of Makkah and the Muhammad of Medina. These are very two different characters. But let's before we jump into that, he continues to say in verse 5, Surah Al-Ahzab, Surah 33, it says, call them by the names of their fathers, that is just here in the sight of Allah. But if you know not their fathers' names, call them your brothers in faith or your mu'ala. But there is no blame on you if you make a mistake therein. What counts is the intention of your hearts, and Allah is oft forgiving, most merciful. Now, what is he saying here? He's saying, do not call him Zaid bin Muhammad. Don't call him that. Allah does not like that. Call him, call them, these adopted children, call them by their fathers. And if you do not know their fathers' names, then call them by your brothers in Islam. In other words, you see, the Arabs, even the Muslims, they used to call this young man Zaid bin Muhammad. So Allah is rebuking them, or somebody is making Allah to rebuke these people. They say, oh, no, don't call him Zaid bin Muhammad, call him Zaid bin Arif. Why? Because Muhammad is wanting to distance himself from this young man, so that we will not accuse him for marrying Zainab, his adopted son's former ex-wife. And so now he comes on and says, oh my, don't call them that. So we tend to ask now, we are forced actually to ask, is this verse in heaven, in the heavenly tablets before the creation of the world? Are these not words that fittingly they come to brainwash us? They come to protect the prophet. They come to cleanse the prophet in a way. Now, listen again to verse 40. It says, Muhammad is not a father to any of your men. Now, let's go on to this verse. Now it says, verse 6, the prophet is closer to the believers than their own selves, than their own souls. And his wives are their mothers. Blood relations among each other have closer personal ties in the decree of Allah than the brotherhood of believers and muajirs. Nevertheless, do what is just to your closest friends. Such is the writing of the decree of Allah. In other words, Allah is saying, the prophet's wives are your mothers. Now, you cannot understand merely by reading this what Muhammad is trying to say. You see, Muhammad was an elder man at the age of 50. He marries a young girl named Aisha bint Abu Bakr. Aisha, the daughter of Abu Bakr. She was 6 years old. A young baby of 6 years old. A young child. When Muhammad died in 632 AD, this young girl was actually only aged 18 years. Now, it is of importance to remember that among all the prophets' wives, they were widows apart from Aisha. Now, the first marriage that Muhammad had, and I take special time to talk about that on a different time, he married Khadija, and this was like the best marriage Muhammad had. But after that, when Khadija died, he marries several women. Among them is this child. Now, there was a Sahaba. There was a companion of the Prophet. His name was Tualia bin Ubaidullah. Now, Tualia loved Aisha. And he was heard saying that when Muhammad dies, I will marry you. And he would say, when this old man dies, when Muhammad, the Prophet of Allah, dies, I will marry Aisha. And when this news got to the man of God, once again, in the name of Allah, Allah brings revelation suitable for that occasion. He says, and his wives are your mothers. In other words, you cannot marry your mother. You cannot marry your mother. And therefore, you cannot marry Aisha, Tualia. Even if you love her, you cannot marry her. And so from the age of 18, this young lady was condemned to widowhood for the rest of her life until she died. She was condemned never to marry again. Why? Because a man expressed a desire to marry her while she was still married to the man of God. Just like the man of God expressed a desire to marry Zainab while she was married to Zaid. Now somebody has got to tell Muslim brothers, and my friends you here, somebody has got to tell you the truth of these things. This is no revelation. This is no revelation. These are revelations that are suitable for the moment. And somebody is using Allah here as a puppet to cleanse himself, to protect himself. And Aisha discovered this. It is not me. It's Aisha that discovered it. What does it say? Aisha says in hadiths that have been brought down, when she heard some of these things, she said, it looks like Allah, your Lord, does not hesitate to fulfill your desires. He tells the Prophet Muhammad, Ya Rasulullah, it seems like Allah is only there to fulfill your desires. I'm paraphrasing our words, but in a nutshell, that's what she said. She discovered that these things were not in reality. Now, anyway, so at the beginning, Muhammad wanted to show that Islam, as a unifying factor, can bring a man that was an adopted slave to a place where she can marry a noble Quraysh woman, and now it turns the tables around. Now, let me discuss one more verse in this chapter and see again how Muhammad is using Allah as a puppet. Look at verse. Actually, let me discuss two verses. Verse 36. It says, it is not fitting for a believer, man or woman, when a matter has been decided by Allah and His Messenger, to have any option about their decision. If anyone disobeys Allah and His Messenger, it is indeed, he is indeed on a clearly wrong path. So Muhammad here is coming and saying, no. Whatever I have done cannot be questioned. Why? Because I am the man of God. Whatever I do is commanded by God. So you cannot question me. So the Muslim, man or woman, has no option when Allah and His Prophet have decided. Now my question is, you are telling us the Quran is a revelation from God that has been there from eternity, is uncreated, was there in the heavenly tablets before man was created, before mankind, before anything else. The Quran was there. Yet this verse is saying that decrees, decisions are made by Allah and His Prophet. In other words, for this ayah to be true, the Prophet must have been there before creation for him to be able to make a decision together with Allah. And now Muslims are telling us, oh, you Christians are shirk. You're ascribing partners with Allah. Yet this verse is a kufr. This verse is a total shirk, because it shows that the decisions cannot be made of Allah alone, but it is Allah and His Prophet. It is Allah and His Messenger. And therefore, you cannot even question. Today, Zainab bint Jash is my wife. Me as Zaid. Tomorrow, you are telling me, no. She's actually your mother. So in other words, I used to have my mother for a wife. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And therefore this verse here is saying, you do not have an option. You cannot. It is Allah and His Prophet who have decided. Now my question is, when did they decide? So what caliber, what position is the Prophet having If it is him and and God that have to make a decision, and that decision they make is abiding forever. Now verse 50, it says, and I'm not going anywhere apart from chapter 33 of the Quran. Take your Quran and read together with me. Verse 50. O prophet, we have made lawful to you your wives whom you have paid their dawah, dowry, and those whom you have whom your right hand possess out of the prisoners of war whom Allah has assigned to thee, and daughters of your paternal uncles and aunts, and daughters of your maternal uncles and aunts who migrated from Makkah with thee, and any believing woman who dedicates her soul to the prophet, if the prophet wishes to wed her. This is only for you and not for the believers at large. We know what we have appointed for them, and to their wives and captives, and their right hands and their right hands possess, in order that there should be no difficulty for you, and Allah is oft forgiving, oft merciful. What is he forgiving when he has given him the permission to marry his paternal cousins, his maternal cousins, the daughters of his uncles? He has given him permission. Of any believing woman, in any Muslim woman, he was given a permission to marry them. And so Allah finishes by saying that he is oft merciful, oft forgiving. And I wonder, what is he forgiving? But also, this is the verse that when Aisha added, she said, it seems that your Lord hastens to fulfill thy desires. So in other words, he could be able to marry. The Muslims was only allowed to marry up to 4 at one time, including, and it would include the concubines. Muhammad also had concubines, like Mary the Copt, Maria Coptia, the mother of his son Ibrahim. But he also had all these women. Mark Ewer said they were all widows. Either their husbands had died, or some of them, their husbands had died in the hands of the prophet. But nevertheless, he had the permission and the will to marry anyone that he wished. And that is only special for the prophet. Now let me finish by verse 53. In fact, let me begin from verse 52. It is very funny. You find time and read this story. I'm telling you, sometimes, my Muslim friends, you read the Quran without even digesting it. I dare you to read this book and you will get out of Islam. Read. Open your eyes. Read it and you will get out of Islam. Verse 52. It is not lawful for you to marry more women after this, nor to change them for other wives, even though their beauty attracts you, except any that your right hand should possess as handmaids, and Allah does watch over all things. Now this verse 52 and verse 50 contradict one another. Verse 52, Surah Al-Ahzab, and verse 50. Verse 50 says you can marry any women. Now verse 52 says, no, after this. Now after this, mark you, what is that? You need to go back to Ibn Kathir. You need to go back to Jalalain. You need to go back to the guys that are giving us the Sababul Nuzul to be able to understand why this verse. Sayyid al-Kutubu actually discusses this, and I would want to set aside a day that we can discuss the relation between chapter 33 verse 50 and chapter 33 verse 52. Let's go on verse 53 and conclude from there. It says, O ye who believe, enter not the prophets and houses until leave or permission is given to you for a meal, and not so early as to wait for its preparation. But when you are invited, enter, and when you have taken your meal, disperse without seeking familiar talk. Such behavior annoys the prophet, and he is ashamed to dismiss you. But Allah is not ashamed to tell you the truth. And when you ask his ladies, his wives, for anything you want, ask them from before a screen. That makes for a greater purity for your hearts and for their hearts and for theirs. Nor is it right for you that you should annoy Allah's messenger, nor that you should marry his widows after him at any time. Truly, such a thing in Allah's sight is enormity. Oh, I read these things and I'm like, oh God, would you open the eyes of my Muslim friends? How? He says, O ye who believe, O you Muslims, do not enter into the Prophet's house. Now, instead of Muslims discussing this, you know what they are discussing about? The Shia are saying, oh, Ahlul Bayt is Ali and his wife Fatima and his children Hussein and Hassan. And the Ahlul Sunnah al Jama'ah now are also on the other side discussing who is the Ahlul Bayt. It cannot be this and it cannot be that. But the thing is, there is something here that Allah is saying. Or rather, somebody is using Allah, again as I said, as a puppet to cleanse himself. He says, do not enter into the Prophet's houses until you've been granted permission. And even when you have been granted permission, don't go there so early as to wait for dinner to be prepared. Now this verse is revealed at a time when Muhammad had married Zainab bint Jash, and he prepared a ceremony. And the Muslims were there, some of them wanting to learn the deen, some of them wanting to discuss, prolonging the discussions. And this man of God wants to be with his wife, his new wife. In fact, Zainab used to gloat. She used to boast about her marriage to the Prophet, that it was ordained from the heavens. Now, because she was apparently a very beautiful woman, according to Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim, and the stories therein. Now, it says, even when you wait, don't wait for the food. And when it has been prepared, when you've been invited, go eat and disperse without seeking familiar talk. For such behavior annoys the man of God. The man of God is ashamed to tell you, but Allah is not ashamed. So in other words, it's actually Muhammad that is saying this, but he's using Allah to say it. So the man of God. He says he's annoyed, it annoys him, but he's ashamed to tell you. He's afraid to tell you, but Allah is not afraid to tell you this. So dismiss. And when you talk to his wives, when you talk to his ladies, do it behind a veil. Do it in a small voice, so that, they don't talk, and somehow it is implanted in your hearts, a desire to be with them, a desire to marry them. And you know what? His wives are your mothers. In other words, you cannot marry your mother. That is what Allah is saying. Now, incorporate this. So when you ask a Muslim, how is Aisha and Zainab and Afsha Your mothers, they say they are our mothers in faith because they have taught us the faith. But how about their husband? He's the one that taught you faith. Is he not your father? Is he not actually the rightful one to be your father? How comes he is not your father, yet his wives are your mothers? Now you must understand that Muhammad was a very clever man, a clever leader. And to that, I must salute him. Now, let me take you to Yusuf Hali's translation and see verse 40. You remember the one that we read, that the prophet is not a father to any of your men? Now, it says something here that is very important for us to understand. Let me just find it. Verse 40, 37, 31. Okay. Now, I'm going to read what he says here in his footnote. It says, when a document is sealed, it is complete, and there can be no further addition. The Prophet Muhammad closed that long lineage of messengers and teaching, and Allah's teaching, and will always be continuous. And there has been and will be no prophet after Muhammad. That is, on the first part of the verse. Now, according to some qirats, some readings of the Quran, and that is actually what I am looking for in particular, there are some of the qirats that read, and he is the father, the spiritual father. But the notion of Muhammad being a spiritual father is actually foreign in Islam. It is not there. But his wives are your mothers. And so you need to broaden your mind, read the Quran with an open mind. And I assure you, reading, especially this chapter, will get you out of Islam. And so let me stop there. And basically, I wish we had more discussions on this and just see how the Prophet was actually using Allah. And I dare say that he was using Allah as a cover-up because of some of the things that he was doing. Oh, and if you are there, Ramadan, I see you, and many other people. Actually, the ayahs that talk about the hijab, I will come and talk about that and continue to discuss chapter 33. You will discover, in a nutshell, what I have been saying is that Allah never gave nothing. Never gave nothing. And this chapter demonstrates that, in my humble submission. Thank you, friends. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this broadcast. And if you want to give your contribution, you are most welcome to give your contribution. And it has been a wonderful discussion. Just take your time. Read chapter 33 of the Quran, and you will see some of these things that I've been talking about. God bless you, and see you soon again.